Well, 2 down, 1 more to go. Hopefully this one won't be as bad. I hate when I'm wrong. Ah! Just my luck. First I have a Joker guy wannabe, now I have a Bendy reject after me. Bendy. Oh no. Son of a...
Well, well, well. We meet again. Yes, this is my first go with Bendy and the Ink Machine, though I wish it was my last. A while back, I streamed a Switch version of Bendy, and today, I review it off the PlayStation 4. I had technical problems with the Nintendo Switch version, so for the sake of the review, I decided to go with the PlayStation 4 version. It would have saved me $10. Hope it was worth it, GameStop. But what exactly is Bendy and the Ink Machine, I hear nobody asking? Released in 2017, Bendy captivated content creators and, just like a certain other indie game, exploded in popularity. Released episodically, fans and viewers were glued to the edge of their seats, eagerly awaiting the next episode. Theories were created, merchandise up a storm, and more games have arrived, and even more are yet to come. My intrigue for Bendy was hit and miss. I saw a few videos here and there, but it never really piqued my interest compared to other titles. That was until 2018. At that year's RTX, or Rooster Teeth convention, Bendy was heavily advertised everywhere. Even the badge lanyards were Bendy themed. For the reason why, I'll play a small clip from my Ruby Grim Eclipse video. One thing to keep in mind is that this is Rooster Teeth's first official game as a publisher. Later on, they would publish games like Super Rad Ray Gun and Bendy and the Ink Machine. Yep, Rooster Teeth were publishing a console port of Bendy. So eventually, I let my guard down and bought the game to experience it myself. Before we begin, I should stress that I'm not the best when it comes to horror. Whether it's the dark ambiance or the pathetic jump scares, me and horror don't clash well together. But they didn't stop me from playing Resident Evil 7. So Bendy, do your worst. Again. Released on Game Jolt, Bendy caught the eyes of many and became an instant cult classic. Today, well, it's a thing. But to understand why, we must go over the plot, and there's a lot to summarize. And yes, I'm spoiling a lot, both in gameplay and in story. So, if you somehow never played Bendy and want a fresh experience, best to stop here. I, on the other hand, must continue, so let's get this over with. In the 1930s, Joey Drew Studios made a splash with their cartoon creation, Bendy. 30 years later, after it fell on hard times, co-creator Henry returned to the studio, as requested by his former colleague, Joey Drew. Henry quickly realizes things are worse than he thought. Ink monstrosities are rampant, a demonic Bendy is wreaking havoc, and more mysteries are uncovered the deeper he goes. Henry hopes to find a way out, while also uncovering what exactly Joey wanted him to find. The story isn't entirely told to you, with some details you need to figure out on your own. It takes a certain indie series approach to the lore. Okay, yes, a lot of comparisons will be made to Five Nights at Freddy's. But considering when Bendy was released at the time, you couldn't blame me. FNAF was the king of indie horror games. To a lot of people, it was the horror renaissance gamers needed. Even back then, comparisons to FNAF were constantly made, even though Bendy was trying to make its own identity. That's not to say the story isn't enjoyable, it's just not as in-depth if you don't look hard enough. Heck, Henry might as well be the Ethan Winters of Bendy. He's the bland horror protagonist that lets the world around him be the focus instead of him. Fortunately, some aspects are interesting enough, such as the taped messages going into how the studio was run and the different creatures roaming the studio. I'll give Bendy credit that it's a unique idea, an animation studio having a machine to bring its creations to life, and how far someone would go to bring that dream to reality. You sadly either get hooked by the plot, or you don't, and most of the game relies on you getting hooked. There's twists, there's turns, there's emotion, and plenty of soup.
What do you mean you're at soup? I mean I'm at soup! What store are you in? I'm at the soup store! Why are you buying clothes at the soup store? Shut up!
Unfortunately, the game doesn't exactly hook me onto its story. It's a shame because I do see they're trying their hardest to make a good story. But it's because they try so hard, I see it as a huge hurdle should you try it out. Normally, I wouldn't harp so much over a story. If it's a good story, or even a great story, I'll enjoy the game even more, but it isn't necessary to get the full experience.
That is, unless the game wants you to sing its praises, or have your focus entirely shifted onto it.
There's a couple of examples to this to explain what I mean. Borderlands 3 and Batman Arkham Knight. Both gameplay-wise are great, and their presentations are stellar. However, both games put such a heavy emphasis on the story it's almost distracting, and both, sadly, have stories that fail to impress. So much so, you wonder if it's worth continuing at all despite the fun gameplay.
A friend once told me that it's okay to skip the story as long as the game itself is fun to play. And while I can understand that viewpoint, it's when the game forces you to indulge in its plot that it feels more awkward than the GameStop employee forcing you to get the next pre-order. I'm not even going into you. Go away.
There are some who are passionate for the story, and some who couldn't be bothered. While I'm sadly in the latter, I still understand why the former enjoy Bendy's tale.
What I don't quite understand is the gameplay. Well, I mean, I do, but... oh, you'll get it.
Bendy and the Ink Machine is a first-person survival horror game. Your goal is to complete the 5 chapters, completing tasks along the way. From solving puzzles to collecting items, the game has you comb the chapter's levels to get further into the story. I know I made the Resident Evil 7 reference before, but playing Bendy after RE7 made me want to call this game Bendy and the Resident Wannabe. Combine that with the FNAF storytelling of hiding lore details everywhere you look, and I haven't had a more awkward time than Castlevania Lords of Ripoffs. There are some neat puzzles, some that change with every playthrough, but others will leave little satisfaction when solved, or hurt your head from beating your desk so much. Don't get me wrong, I do like a good puzzle, but some of these puzzles, especially towards the final levels, feel tacked on because of how the game started.
And oh, what a tale that is in itself.
After the success of Chapter 1, the developers wanted to up their game with Chapter 2. Now, along with expanding puzzles, combat was added in. A press of R2 with any held weapon swings towards enemies, mainly ink blots. It works for what it is, though don't be surprised if you die while attacking, since attacking leaves you wide open for damage, your health indicated by ink covering the screen. More emphasis on the plot started here as well, the business of the studio taking center stage. Then Chapter 3 happened. What were 30-minute chapters were double, with more secrets to find, a new antagonist, and your favorite type of missions? Fetch quests! No lie, most of the chapter is focused on collecting items, and while it's impressive to be in one big map, it's a drag. Since you're basically doing the same thing over and over, just with a different coat of paint. The antagonist sadly didn't help, someone who wants perfection and will stop at nothing to acquire it. But my favorite thing about the chapter? Random encounters.
Oh, no, not the mechanic. This. Ah!
One thing I have to give Bendy credit for is paying tribute to the content creators. Several songs made about Bendy had their instrumentals put into the game. And of course, no one could forget a certain voice put into the game.
I don't be seeing what the big deal is. So what if I went and painted some of those Bendy dolls with a crooked smile? That's sure no reason for Mr. Drew to be flying off the handle at me.
Yep, Jacksepticeye himself played a part, and as a big fan of his, this warmed my heart it actually happened. Games rarely pay tribute to content creators who show their passion towards what they played, and when it does happen, it's satisfaction incarnate.
So we move to Chapter 4.
Chapter 4 thankfully has a shorter runtime, but once again, Bendy decides to expand its horizons. Along with puzzles and stealth sections are ink creators, these devices that create parts for you depending on what the puzzle needs. It's rarely used, but I guess it's a nice concept. What isn't so nice a concept are what's added to the combat. Boss fights. Now, technically Chapter 3 started it with the secret boss, but if you didn't find it, Chapter 4 is where it all started. And meh. Something about these bosses never felt right. They're cool concepts like fighting a possessed bear attraction or fighting your former ally now mutated, but the fights themselves are either average or fail to impress. They go for scares more than tactics, so remain calm and you should be fine. For the most part, but we're almost there. That just leaves the final chapter, Chapter 5, leaning a bit more on the action side rather than survival like the game started with. A book rush here, this boat section which fails in scaring you, and easily one of my least favorite final bosses. One hit, you're dead. But I went into enough detail during my least favorite final bosses list. Card up there. And of course, for the final chapter, it adds more story, with just enough loose ends for theorists to think what the game was truly about. I myself was just relieved that it was over. And confused about the ending. Really confused. I should also mention there is a stealth section, relying on you to hide against the enemies while getting ink blots. But I'm not gonna lie, by that point, I just didn't care. If I saw them, I just gun-hoed it, and luckily, I was able to get it done. But the fact that I was done with stealth pretty much tells you how I felt about the game. But, that's not even the worst part. Upon completion, you're rewarded 2 things. A device to see invisible text to add hidden lore, and a bonus chapter showing models and details about the game. I'm sure you're wondering why I'm not showing this.
A long while back, I decided to stream Bendy in the Ink Machine, specifically the Switch version. Those who were there might remember that the bonus chapter was glitched out, meaning I could never get into it. I thought the PS4 version would have been different. Well, it was different.
While recording from Chapter 3, I just made it to Chapter 5. I saw the autosave logo and decided to stop for a break. I turned on the console, and to my utter shock, all of my progress was gone! Apparently, Chapter 3 and 4 called a foul, because my save for Chapter 5 didn't show up. I loaded the file, thinking it was mistitled, and there I was, right at the start of Chapter 3.
So I used the game's chapter selection, thinking I could still get the bonuses at the end. The warning they give you at the bottom wasn't lying.
Should you play from the chapter section, none of your progress is saved, despite the chapter telling me I unlocked the bonuses. No device, and no bonus chapter. At that point, I was done. Watching it on YouTube was worth more than replaying close to 2 hours of gameplay I wasn't having fun with.
This also goes into your death penalty, where you go to the most recent Bendy statue you came across. Combine that with cheap deaths, and you have a very frustrated player very quickly.
I just wasn't getting into it like I thought I would. I got into FNAF for the lore, so why wasn't the same thing happening here? The story had an interesting concept, the visuals looked clean, voice acting was pretty good, for the most part. So what was it? Then it hit me. It's all about the hype. That first experience, your mind bending, no pun intended, over what is going on. The initial fear and emotion, I didn't have that this time. This was the second playthrough I've done. I had an idea of what to expect. The only thing that got me were the jump scares. But I hate jump scares, so that doesn't mean much. Combine that with gameplay that loses its luster over time and feels more experimental than Sonic Lost World, and you have a product with a lot of promise, but fails to deliver on it in the end. And for a franchise already as successful as this, with merch galore, it feels weird that where it started left such a sour taste in the mouth.
But then again, the franchise seems to be improving.
It already has spin-off games and a sequel soon to come out, so I'm sure the fandom is loving every second of it. And don't misunderstand, if you love Bendy, that's awesome. You just saw something here that I just couldn't despite my attempts. I don't see myself returning to where it started. Just one story to keep on the bookshelf.
Tell me another one, Uncle Joey.
Speaking of, whatever happened to... Hey man, come on. So you had a bit of a rocky start. Who doesn't? Look, when it comes to life, and anything we make, there are always going to be ups, and there's always going to be downs. You're going to have rough patches, you're going to have successes. The important thing is what you do with that. Learn what you did wrong. Learn what you did right. Learn what you can improve on. There's always something new to learn. There's always something that you can hopefully work out. And maybe one day, you'll be able to come out on top again like you always hoped. Everyone has that opportunity. Even you. Hey, nice mask. A mask. That's all three. That's all three! I need a chair. So, now that we're in our thinking chair, let's think. So, we're trying to figure out what my next big project should be. And the clues are a heart, a ghost, and now a mask. What can my next big project be with a heart, a ghost, and a mask? Maybe not a ghost. Another word for a ghost is phantom. So that could instead be a phantom. And maybe for some reason this phantom has to wear a mask because it's stealing parts. So it's a phantom thief. Couldn't be. But that would take way too long. I mean, that's like 100+ hours. I couldn't do that. Or maybe I could. Yeah. Yeah, that could work. Alright. Well, I think I finally have my next inspiration. But I'm going to need a little time. I need to warm up. It's been a while since I've dived into Persona 5. Never mind Royal. So, I think I know just the trick. Well, get ready for a huge project. It's going to be interesting. I'm the PS2Man, and get ready for quite a ride.
So close. Just one more video and the most ambitious idea I've ever had can finally begin. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching this review of Bendy and the Ink Machine. I hope this review didn't come out as too cynical, but I was having a hard time figuring out exactly how I wanted to say my feelings were. But I hope you do enjoy it either way. If you did and you want to see more, well, you know what to do. Until then, everybody, please stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you later.